She thinks she's perfect, right? She thinks she's important. I will teach her a lesson.
Listen, come closer. Let me tell you a story. A story about a kind young woman whose stepsister stole her fiancé with a shocking lie, not knowing that a DNA test will expose the truth. Before we begin, if you love emotional stories filled with secrets, betrayal, and powerful endings, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story will leave you speechless. Sophia was the kind of girl whose presence felt like sunlight in a dark room. She woke up early every morning, not just to help with the house, but to make sure everyone was comfortable. She cooked breakfast for her father and stepmother, made Clara's favorite tea, and even cleaned the garden before school. Her movements were gentle, her words soft, and her smile always calm, even when her heart ached. People often said she had too much goodness in her heart, almost as if her kindness could fill every empty corner in the world. But Sophia never thought about praise. She lived for others, believing that love and care could fix everything. Clara, her stepsister, watched Sophia with a burning envy that no one could see. She grew up in the same house, yet she always felt smaller, invisible, and overshadowed. When neighbors or family praised Sophia's hard work or soft manners, Clara's chest tightened as if her lungs refused to breathe. Even their father, who tried to love them both equally, smiled more at Sophia's efforts, sometimes forgetting to notice Clara's presence. Clara hated it, yet no one suspected the fire smoldering in her heart. She learned to hide it well, smiling and nodding, pretending to celebrate Sophia's success while secretly planning how to take it all away. It wasn't just jealousy, it was deep, sharp resentment. Clara hated the way people flocked to Sophia's side, loved her laughter, sought her advice, and treated her with respect. She hated that everyone admired the gentleness that Clara could never fake. And most of all, she hated that Daniel, the man Sophia loved, had chosen her for the engagement. Clara's envy simmered quietly, a dark storm gathering behind her smile. She told herself it wasn't wrong to want what she felt she deserved, even if it meant taking it from her own sister. That evening, Sophia approached her father with a nervous but excited smile. "Dad, there's someone I want you all to meet," she said softly. Her father's eyes lit up with curiosity. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, just for a moment, as if she had already guessed the happiness Sophia was about to claim, happiness she wanted for herself. In that instant, the air in the house shifted. Something invisible, heavy, and dangerous began to settle, and none of them knew that this small moment would mark the start of a storm that could destroy everything Sophia had ever loved. The day Daniel stepped into the house, the air seemed to change. Sophia's heart raced as she smoothed the front of her dress, afraid she might stumble over her own excitement. She had told her father for weeks about Daniel, sharing every small detail of their love, every careful gesture, and every promise he had made. Now he was here, standing in the room she had grown up in, and everything felt fragile and magical at the same time. Daniel bowed respectfully to her father and greeted her stepmother with a soft smile, his calm voice carrying warmth and sincerity. Clara, who had been quietly standing near the doorway, felt a cold twist in her chest. She watched Daniel with hawk-like eyes, noting every polite gesture, every soft laugh Sophia shared with him. He looked at Sophia the way their father had never looked at her, the way everyone had always looked at Sophia, and the hatred that had been simmering inside Clara for years boiled hotter. She smiled politely when he glanced her way, but inside, her hands were trembling. Every laugh, every tender look he gave Sophia, was a knife slicing through her. During dinner, Daniel spoke carefully, explaining his work, his dreams, his values. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and laughed gently at Sophia's jokes. Her father nodded in approval, smiling in quiet pride. The warmth in the room was almost unbearable to Clara. She had planned to blend into the shadows, to be unnoticed, but she realized she could no longer hide the depth of her desire. She began forming a plan, small and secretive, imagining how she could turn Sophia's perfect happiness into her own. Each time Daniel touched Sophia's hand to help her with a glass or smiled at her softly, Clara felt her pulse quicken, a dangerous excitement building behind her calm facade. After dinner, as Sophia and Daniel walked near the gate, discussing simple things like flowers and dreams, Clara lingered behind the curtain, watching every movement. Her lips curled into a smile, but it was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of calculation. If she can have him, why not me? She whispered under her breath. The seed of betrayal had been planted in her heart, and it was growing fast. That night, as Sophia went to bed dreaming of their future, Clara lay awake, plotting quietly. In that small, silent room, the first step of her scheme took root, and a storm was waiting just beyond the horizon. The weeks that followed were a dream for Sophia. Every morning, Daniel would call her, his voice soft and warm, asking about her day, about her family, about how she slept. In his words, she felt safety. In his laughter, she felt love. They spent long afternoons walking through the small gardens near her house, talking about dreams, laughing at small jokes, and sharing quiet moments where nothing else in the world existed. Sophia felt her heart soar with each day. She had never known a love so pure. But Clara watched everything. Every laugh between them, every soft word Daniel whispered to Sophia, was a sting in her heart. She hated how naturally Daniel's eyes followed Sophia's movements, how he responded to her words with admiration. Clara's envy deepened into a quiet rage. She began to mimic Sophia's soft voice when speaking to Daniel alone, to wear clothes similar in color and style, to brush her hair in the same way. She wanted to become a mirror image, to slowly erase Sophia from Daniel's memory, though the thought of hurting her sister made her pulse quicken. The engagement announcement brought joy to everyone but Clara. Sophia glowed as her father held her hand proudly and her stepmother smiled, offering words of encouragement. "You have made a wise choice, my daughter," her father said, his eyes shining. Daniel took Sophia's hands in his, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "I love you, Sophia. I have always loved you," he whispered, and Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. Meanwhile, Clara's smile never wavered, but her mind worked faster than ever. "If I cannot have him by love," she thought, "then I will take him by other means." Clara's subtle manipulations began almost immediately. She volunteered to help Daniel with wedding plans, offering to accompany him to choose decorations and invitations. She laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, lingered a little too close when he spoke, and placed herself strategically between Sophia and Daniel in moments meant to be private. Once, Sophia entered the living room to find Clara touching Daniel's arm lightly while whispering something. The moment lasted only seconds before Clara pulled away, smiling innocently. Sophia forced herself to believe it was nothing, but the seed of unease had been planted. That small moment, fleeting as it was, would grow into the storm that awaited them all. Clara's jealousy had grown like a wildfire, burning silently inside her. She watched Sophia laugh with Daniel, each giggle, each smile, each tender glance, it was poison to her heart. The more Sophia shone, the darker Clara's thoughts became. At night, she would lie awake, imagining herself in Sophia's place, imagining Daniel holding her hands, laughing at her jokes, praising her instead. Every time she closed her eyes, she rehearsed the lies she would tell, the stories she would whisper, and the ways she would twist reality until everyone believed her instead of Sophia. During the day, Clara wore her mask flawlessly. She offered to help Sophia plan the wedding, seeming gentle and supportive. "Don't worry, Sophia. I'll take care of it," she said, her voice soft, her eyes hiding the storm inside. Daniel trusted her words, believing she was merely trying to help. But behind her polite gestures, she began planting seeds of doubt. A carefully whispered comment here, "I think she's stressed about something," a worried glance there, "maybe Daniel doesn't realize how much pressure she feels," and suddenly, the innocence Sophia felt around her family began to feel heavy, tense, and uncertain. Clara began creating small moments designed to confuse and mislead. One afternoon, she accidentally dropped a book near Daniel's feet and brushed against him while bending down. He looked startled, and Clara's heart raced with excitement. Sophia had entered the room just as he helped Clara up. Clara pulled away with a practiced smile. Oops. That was clumsy of me. Sophia's brow furrowed slightly, a small discomfort forming inside her, but she forced herself to believe Clara had not intended anything. The audience could almost feel the tension in that room, a storm waiting to break, one carefully orchestrated moment at a time. Every day, Clara whispered doubts to her mother and father, portraying herself as the concerned daughter. "I'm just worried about Sophia," she would say, her voice trembling with false sincerity. "She doesn't seem happy." Her stepmother would nod, trusting Clara's concern, and even Daniel began noticing a small hesitation in Sophia's demeanor, though he could not place why. And Clara smiled quietly to herself, knowing the web she had woven was tightening. Everyone believed they were doing what was best, but the truth was far more dangerous. Clara was preparing to steal everything Sophia loved, and no one could see the betrayal hidden behind her gentle, perfect smile. The evening had started like any other, quiet and calm, but Clara had been waiting all day for this moment. Sophia had spent hours laughing with Daniel, picking out wedding invitations, and imagining their future. She had no idea that the storm was already inside her house, ready to destroy everything she loved. Clara walked into the living room, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fake fear. "Everyone. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaking just enough to seem real. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She could sense danger, but she had no idea how deep it ran. Clara fell to her knees before their father, her face wet with staged tears. "It's Daniel, he did this to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with perfect innocence. I'm pregnant, and it's his child." The room went completely silent. Sophia's father froze, his hand reaching instinctively to his mouth. Her stepmother gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel's face turned pale. What do you mean?" he stammered, confusion and fear twisting his features. Sophia's chest tightened, a heavy weight pressing down on her lungs. She tried to speak, to tell the truth, but the room had already swallowed her voice. The pressure was immediate. Everyone's eyes were on Daniel, expecting him to act. He stuttered, "Sophia. I swear. I never," but his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief, shame, and the family's judgment. Clara's act was flawless, her tears were perfectly timed, her voice convincingly broken. Even Sophia's father, who had always trusted his daughter, felt his confidence waver. The seed of doubt had taken root. Clara smiled faintly through her tears, watching Sophia's expression twist in confusion and horror. Her perfect plan was working. By the end of the night, the engagement was cancelled. The ring was taken. Invitations were thrown away. Sophia sat alone in her room, clutching the dress she had imagined wearing on her happiest day, staring at it as if it could explain the injustice. Her heart ached with betrayal, pain, and disbelief. Outside, the quiet house was filled with Clara's subtle laughter, almost imperceptible but burning in Sophia's ears like smoke. Sophia buried her face in her hands, whispering, Why would she do this to me?" And in that moment, the first true seeds of despair and determination planted themselves deep in her soul. The house had changed. Sophia felt it in every corner, in every glance, in every quiet moment. Clara now moved through it like she owned it, smiling at Daniel with a sweetness that felt false yet convincing. She planned every detail, the wedding decorations, the guest list, even the small conversations, as if she were the bride who had always been meant to have Daniel. The house, once filled with warmth, now felt heavy and cold. Sophia moved silently through the rooms, a shadow of her former joy, watching her life be rewritten by her own stepsister. Her father barely looked at her anymore. "We must do what is best for the family," he said quietly, and Sophia realized how deeply everyone had been deceived. Even her stepmother, once a comforting presence, now smiled only at Clara, her pride misplaced. Sophia felt invisible, her happiness stolen in the blink of an eye. Every object in the house, the invitations, the decorations, the small gifts, reminded her that her world had been stolen. And yet, she said nothing. She could not cry in front of them, she had to survive. Even Daniel was distant. The doubt planted by Clara's lies had not yet fully left his heart, though his instinct told him something was wrong. He avoided Sophia's eyes, unsure what to believe, guilty for having believed Clara, yet wary of the truth he could not yet see. Clara's careful manipulation had created a perfect illusion. She laughed softly in Daniel's presence, whispered tiny worries about Sophia to him, and carefully built a story of her own innocence. Sophia watched it all silently, heart aching, knowing she was being erased piece by piece. Months passed, and Sophia learned to move like a shadow through the house. She smiled when needed, spoke only when spoken to, and watched her stepsister flourish in her place. Every night, she pressed her hands to her chest and whispered, one day the truth will come." Inside, a quiet fire burned, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and determination. Clara's triumph was temporary, and somewhere in Sophia's heart, the first thought of justice and revenge had begun to grow. The storm had not yet come, but it was gathering, and when it struck, nothing would ever be the same. Months had passed since Clara stole Sophia's engagement, and the house had settled into a quiet, uneasy rhythm. Clara smiled, cradling her baby, laughing lightly at Daniel's jokes, moving as if she had always been the rightful bride. But Daniel could no longer ignore the subtle inconsistencies gnawing at him. He began noticing that the baby's features didn't match his own. Small details that once seemed harmless, the crooked smile, the shape of a tiny nose, now caused a cold knot to form in his chest. The timeline, the dates, the months, they didn't add up. Daniel tried to dismiss his doubts at first. He told himself he was being paranoid, that Clara's happiness required his trust. But the feeling grew stronger each day, like a shadow he could not shake. He started observing Clara more closely. How she moved, how she laughed, how she avoided looking at him directly when he asked questions about the pregnancy. Small lies were easy to spot once you knew where to look, and the careful web Clara had spun began to tremble under his quiet scrutiny. One evening, Daniel quietly asked Clara a casual question about the baby's timeline. "When exactly did you find out?" he asked softly, trying to sound normal. Clara's eyes flickered with something almost imperceptible, fear. She smiled quickly and said, "Oh, it was just around the same time as the wedding plans, I think." Her voice was calm, but Daniel felt the hesitation, the tiny crack in her mask. He remembered Sophia, her honesty, her warmth, her openness, and the comparison burned painfully in his mind. Something was very wrong, and he could feel it deep in his bones. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Daniel quietly arranged for a DNA test. He wanted proof, something black and white, something that would either confirm or deny the gnawing suspicion that had haunted him for months. His hands trembled as he filled the forms, each signature a mixture of fear, hope, and guilt. He knew that once the truth came out, it could destroy everything, or perhaps finally restore what had been stolen. Sophia, in her quiet corner, could almost sense it too. The moment of reckoning was drawing closer, and the house, filled with secrets and lies, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The day the DNA results arrived, the house was unusually quiet. Sophia felt it in her chest, a heavy tension she couldn't shake. Daniel held the envelope with shaking hands, pacing back and forth in the living room, his face pale and tight with worry. Clara sat nearby, cradling her baby, smiling faintly, convinced that her plan had worked perfectly. But Daniel's hands were trembling, his chest tight. Something inside him knew the truth was about to explode like thunder. Sophia, standing quietly in the corner, felt her pulse quicken. She didn't have to see the papers to know that the moment of truth was here. Daniel opened the envelope slowly, each movement deliberate. He unfolded the letter, scanning the numbers and words that would decide everything. His eyes widened. The baby was not his. The room seemed to hold its breath. Clara's smile faltered for the first time. "Daniel, what is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm, but the tiniest edge of fear betrayed her. The silence was deafening. Daniel looked at her, his eyes dark and stormy, as he whispered, It's not mine." Clara froze, her carefully built world collapsing in a single moment. The room seemed to tilt around her. Sophia stepped forward, calm yet commanding, her voice steady but filled with power. "The truth is finally clear." Daniel looked at her, guilt and relief mixing in his eyes. "Sophia, I should have never doubted you," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I believed her lies and ignored the truth I could have seen all along. I'm so sorry." The weight of months of betrayal, heartbreak, and confusion suddenly lifted, leaving space for clarity. Clara's carefully constructed act crumbled, leaving her exposed, trembling, and humiliated. Sophia's father and stepmother stared, ashamed of how easily they had been deceived. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Daniel reached for Sophia's hands, his voice breaking. "I will spend the rest of my life proving my love, Sophia. I promise." Sophia felt the warmth of hope returning, but she knew the choice was hers. She looked at Clara, who now sat defeated, holding the baby she had used as a weapon, realizing the full cost of her jealousy and lies. The storm had passed, but its scars remained. Sophia knew one thing clearly: she could rise, she could forgive, but she would never be the same again. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the living room. Sophia stood tall, her hands folded calmly in front of her, the weight of months of heartbreak slowly lifting from her shoulders. Daniel knelt before her, tears streaking his face, his voice trembling. "Sophia, I was blind. I doubted the one person who has always loved me with her whole heart. I was wrong. I am so sorry. Please, let me make this right." Sophia studied him quietly, remembering every tear she had shed, every moment she had felt betrayed, every night she had spent alone wondering how the world could be so cruel. Clara sat across the room, holding her baby, defeated and humiliated. Her plans had unraveled in an instant. The lies she had whispered, the manipulation she had perfected, all lay bare before everyone. Her eyes were wide, fear and regret filling her expression. Sophia felt a small pang of pity for her stepsister. The envy that had consumed her had destroyed everything she loved, but it was nothing compared to the fire growing in Sophia's heart. She had endured months of betrayal, yet she was alive, stronger, and wiser than she had ever been. Slowly, Sophia stepped closer to Daniel. "You must understand," she said softly, her voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. "Trust is not something that can be given lightly. You lost me once. I am giving you a second chance, yes, but it will not be easy. Every day, every action, you must show me that you deserve this." Daniel nodded, choking back tears. "I swear. I will spend my life proving my love to you. I will never doubt you again. I will protect you, honor you, and love you with all I have." Sophia allowed herself a small, careful smile, the first real glimmer of hope she had felt in months. That evening, the family gathered quietly, the air heavy with reflection. Clara had learned the cost of envy, and the weight of her deceit settled on her shoulders. Sophia walked hand in hand with Daniel, ready to rebuild a love that had been tested by lies, betrayal, and heartbreak. She knew that the path ahead would not always be smooth, but she also knew that truth, patience, and courage had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. As she looked out at the fading sunset, she whispered to herself, "I have chosen love. I have chosen truth, and I have chosen me." The storm had passed, and Sophia stepped forward into a future she would define on her own terms. If this story touched your heart, If you believe truth always finds a way. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories like this, and tell me in the comments, would you forgive, or would you walk away?